Welcome back, everyone, to Monday edition of AP Micro Review. Boy, is this the, if you're going to watch any of these, Fridays we started talking about cost curves. Today we're going to talk about cost curves in the long run, things like that. Tomorrow, perfectly competitive firms. We're going to do all the firm graphs. Every year, there's questions in the free response about firm graphs. Monopolies coming up. So make sure you guys are watching this, doing the free response along with me, because I have a feeling in a couple weeks you're going to see something that we're talking about these days. So welcome once again. Let's get rolling here and talk today about our long run production cost. And here we go. I hope everyone had a decent weekend. I hope you guys got everything done. So Matt Pedlow up in Chelsea, Michigan, and boy, you got to watch the news, right? This is why you take econ. So when you watch the news, all the stuff makes sense. So except this might be, what does that say? Below? Yeah, oil prices went negative. Now, not to get all detailed, these weren't long-term contracts. They were very short-term contracts, but oil actually went negative. But what's more important is the fact that the barrel of oil is dipping below $20 a barrel for the like June, July contracts. And we're talking record plunges. I mean, this is just absolute craziness in the oil markets. And we talked about this last week, right? But normally we would start driving more. Cheap gasoline, it's $1.29 in my town. It's really nowhere to go. So the airlines and us and everyone else not using a whole lot of oil, but craziness. Keep an eye on the news from an econ perspective. Today, first thing I want to start out with you guys is going over the question I left. And I do apologize once again, giving you a little bit of work on Friday. Hopefully you got this done. If you're watching these not live and you're watching these on a random Tuesday and you're wondering what this guy man's talking about, just stay with me. All right, here we go. Calculate the marginal product of the sixth worker. So marginal product, change in total product over change in quantity, since we're going up by one. So the sixth worker, here's what you're going to do. Make a little, remember, because you guys aren't graphing doesn't mean you can't draw graphs on scrap sheet. There might be tables like this. You're not going to have to draw tables, but you could certainly write all these figures down. 25 minutes, you're probably going to have enough time to get through this thing. So just draw a quick MP, a marginal product, and then you don't have to do all the math. So marginal product of the sixth worker, 3. So show your work. 42 minus 39. That's your work. You went from 39. You hired a sixth worker. They made 42. Therefore, you went up 3. B, does the production function exhibit diminishing returns to labor? Yes. And if it says explain, look, first you go up, you're going up 2, and then all of a sudden you go down 5. So when you hire the fifth worker, instead of going up, they actually made less, the marginal product fell, okay? So the marginal product was 6, you hire the next person, goes up 8, the next person goes up 10, next person goes up 12, and instead of continuing that expansion, then the next person only makes 7. So your total product is increasing, but at a decreasing rate. See, when marginal product falling, what happens to marginal cost? Remember, they're mirror images of each other. We talked about that the other day. So marginal cost will be increasing, because if your marginal product is falling, that means each worker, the next additional worker makes less. So it means it's costing you more. And then D, on a single correct label graph, all the firm's short run average total cost. So you guys have here, actually, a marginal cost curve. And make sure you have average total, average variable, and the marginal cost goes right through the bottom of those. And today I'm going to show you a couple more of those, so we won't need to do it right now. Okay, feeling pretty good about these, I hope. Yes, somewhat easy. Once again, I know I'm harping on this. Know why things are shaped the way they are. And then when things come together like marginal cost, marginal revenue, what does that mean? Why is that important? Things like that. What is allocative efficiency? Things like that. Let's, because we got an easy day today, let's do one more of these. Yes, you've seen the sparkle car wash. We had talked a little bit about this earlier. But so A, with which worker is marginal product maximized? Once again, what do? Just draw your new column. So marginal product, let's see here, 25 with the fourth worker, it looks like. Is that right? No, third worker. Your marginal product is maximized. Sorry, I know my chart doesn't go exactly, but so the first worker goes up 15, second worker goes up 20, third worker goes up 25, all good. And then B, identify and define the principle that explains why marginal product eventually decreases, diminishing marginal returns. Remember, you have to talk about fixed and variable inputs. So the easy kind of an easy answer. If at least one input is held fixed while other inputs are variable, output increases at a decreasing rate. C, why would Sparkle never hire the sixth worker? Because they have negative marginal product, meaning the fifth worker, when you hire the fifth worker, they made 85. When I hired the sixth worker, they only make 80. So I actually lost the amount of output I was producing by hiring that sixth worker. And D, if they charge $6, what is the maximum daily wage? Let's think about this. How do we hire? We hire where wage equals MRP. So make your MRP. And what is marginal revenue product? It is marginal product times the price. So marginal, they say right here, $6 for washing a car. So just multiply these in the fourth worker. So the fourth worker's marginal product is 15. And you're charging $6. So 15 times 6 is 90. And I would pay the sixth worker, or the fourth worker, excuse me, I would pay them $90, right? Because at the margin, why wouldn't I? But I wouldn't pay them more than that because they're making me 90. So there you go. Easy stuff. Make your columns. Always, always, always. When you have a total column, 99% of the time, you're going to have a marginal column next to it. So let's get rolling for today and talk about these long-run production costs and then the types of products. We have to get pretty nitpicky here. If there's going to be math, which I wouldn't be surprised if there was some math in your free response, these are the questions they can ask about, like the types of profit, things like that. So difference between the short and the long run. In the short run, this is important. Don't ever put down like the short run is X amount of months. The long run is this many months. Okay? Yes, some people say the short run is typically anything less than a year from a business standpoint. In econ, we just say in the short run, at least one of your input costs is held fixed. Then you know you're in the short run. In the long run, so like let's use a lease, right? I got to pay my fixed cost every single month. So I open a cupcake store in downtown Chicago. They're charging me $6,000 a month for rent, and I sign a year lease. I know that 3 months into that lease, that is a fixed cost I cannot stop paying. So every month for 12 months, I'm going to pay $6,000. But in the long run, all my costs are variable. So students a lot of times will say, how is that possible? You still have a lease. Okay, so I get done paying that $6,000 a month and I say, I'm not selling enough cupcakes. It's a lot of cupcakes. So what do? I go somewhere else. I go sign a new lease somewhere else. How is that variable? Because it's not fixed anymore. I can go find a lease cheaper. So maybe I move out to Naperville, or maybe I go on up to Highland Park. I do something to make that lease cheaper. So in the long run, right, you just get out of that. Picture a Boeing down here. If you notice that flag to the right, that is the state flag of South Carolina, the palmetto tree, not a palm tree, Fort Moultrie, 1776. You South Carolinians, hopefully you know exactly what that flag is all about. Boeing is based out of Seattle, was forever. And they had a lot of fixed cost out there. They were paying this much for this and their land and all that. But in the long run, if they thought labor costs were going too high, what do? They move. It was almost unthinkable. And they opened up another facility in Charleston. And I think they started making the Dreamliners down there. So in the short run, at least one input is fixed. In the long run, all of your costs are variable. That's the difference. So if they ask you a question on the AP test, that's the difference between the short and the long run. So when we look at long run cost, look at this graph you see right here. This is an important thing to think about. So once again, just price, quantity, cost, and quantity, okay? And you'll notice it's downward sloping throughout. So the first one, I don't know what it is about this, but over the years, my students have struggled with economies of scale. When I was a reader, kids would struggle giving us good definitions or explaining what it is. I don't know why this is such a tough thing for kids. Economies of scale, you'll actually hear outside of a classroom. So all it is production increases, the long run average total cost, or what we call the LATC, right? If you put the R, that's fine. The long run average total cost declines. So there's some easy examples of this, like a utility company. Let's say you want to open a water company in your town. What are you going to do? Go dig a well, and that's probably not going to provide enough water. So you make a water treatment plant. Now, I have no idea how much this is, but I do know that the most recent nuclear power plant we've built in this country, the only one in the last like 30 years, was well over $1 billion, $1.5 billion. I mean, you're talking just immense amount. That's tremendous. 1,000 millions to build a utility company, right? So let's say the thing cost $1 billion. That's your fixed cost. But as you start producing more and more electricity, what happens? So look at this graph. What is it showing us? As we produce more, our long run average cost continues falling. And why is that? Because you're supplying more, so your fixed costs get spread out and they get smaller and smaller, because on average, it's going to drive down your cost. Another way a lot of econ professors in college say this is they say to kids, think about buying in bulk. So if you can buy your things in bulk. So if I start making AirPod containers, I don't know how to make these. I'd need a mold. I would need to find the plastic to go into the mold. I would need some type of hinge on this thing. Like, I can't do this thing, some battery in here. But if I started opening a factory and instead of buying plastic from one guy, I bought plastic from a company, it doesn't matter, in Brazil, and they sent me, $1 million worth of this in bulk. When you buy things in bulk, what happens? It drives down costs. So on average, your costs get cheaper and cheaper. Okay. So if you see a graph, if they ask you to draw economies of scale, your long run average total cost declines throughout your production. There you go. That's economies of scale. Then what if you see one of these? Now, I don't want anyone to panic. Some of your teachers might not have shown you this, but there's an easy way of doing these. All you do is you say, if I have 1 unit of capital and 1 unit of labor, okay, I make 20. Double your inputs, double each input. So economies of scale, if you double your inputs, your output will more than double. So 1 and 1 make 20. If I now hire 2 units of capital and 2 units of labor, I make 50. Okay, so I doubled my inputs from 1 to 1. I made 20. Now 2 to 2 make 50. So I've more than doubled my output. That is economies of scale. Don't worry about these other numbers. You're going right down here. If I triple, I make more than, right? There we go. So that's economies of scale. Okay. Get it, I hope. And then there's something called constant returns to scale, which is shown by flat. So no longer downward sloping, a flat long run average total cost. So it remains constant as your output increases. So if I triple my inputs and I triple my outputs, that is my long run cost. So in this example over here, if I have 1 unit of capital, 1 unit of labor, I make 20. If I have 2 and 2, I make 40, 3 and 3, I make 60. I'm always going up by the same amount, okay? So that's constant returns to scale. And a lot of factories would like to think they're somewhat close to this, that their costs should be falling, but eventually they get to a point where they get more and more constant. But it depends on a number of factors, right? And then, so you have economies of scale. As you produce more, your long run average total cost falls. Constant. As you produce more, it is a constant cost. And the last is diseconomies of scale. Yes, this is an actual thing. So if your output increases, your long run average total cost curve increases. So it's being driven up. And there's a number of reasons why. One of the kind of classic examples you can use for this is like, okay, so let's say I make these, okay? These are really old and really filthy. There's a lot of dirt coming out of these things. I was gardening in them, so we won't show you these. So, but let's say I make these containers, okay? Most of you probably have a pair of these. Are getting cheaper and cheaper now. These are hand-me-downs from my son. And let's say that I have economies of scale. I'm buying that plastic from Brazil, and I'm buying the hinges from a factory in Mexico and whatever, and I'm hiring American labor to put it, it doesn't matter. But all of a sudden, I start getting big, and people are going nuts for mine, okay? What's going to happen? Well, I'm going to start hiring labor to help me out. So I hire maybe an HR department. So I need human resources because I need to know what I'm doing when I hire all the other people. I hire logistics, executive vice president logistics. Those are the people who are going to move the things around. Sales. I start getting bureaucratic, right? Bloated. Costs start swelling up. That's diseconomies of scale. As I produce more, it's driving up my cost. Maybe people are fighting for the resources now, and someone else wants that plastic, and it's going to drive up my costs. So now I'm stuck experiencing diseconomies of scale. So as you produce more, in this case, oops, sorry about that. Look what happens. If I have 1 unit of capital, 1 unit of labor, once again, we make 20. If I double my inputs, I did not make 40. right? That would have been constant. I didn't make more than 40, which would have been economies of scale. I made less than 40, so that is diseconomies of scale, right? Double your inputs. If you make less than double the output, you're experiencing diseconomies of scale. So there you go. 3 long-range cost curves, nothing tricky to them. And there you go. So economies of scale will be seen where it's sloping downward, constant returns to scale where it's even, and then diseconomies of scale as we slope up, okay? So if you have to draw it, there you go, that's what it looks like. And let's do a couple questions so we can get some explanation things done today. And then we're gonna do a couple free response, because obviously I know you guys are really focused on those free response. A farmer grows wheat using 2 inputs, labor and land, whose prices are constant. If she doubles her input, she finds the quantity of wheat produces more than doubles. Okay, so the first thing you need to say to yourself is, what are they asking me? Well, they're saying that this farmer's cost, they're doubling their inputs and they're more than doubling output. So first thing you say, I know what that is, that's economies of scale. As soon as you answer that, then you can move on. Because remember, attacking the question, and that's my goal. When we go through these free response, hopefully at this point, you start to figure out like, what exactly are they asking me? What do they want me to know? That's the important thing. So then, you know, it's economies of scale. Therefore, it must be true that in this output range, her long run average total cost. What is economies of scale? It's when your long run average total cost declines as you produce more. So B, it's downward sloping. So notice, nowhere on there does it say that it's economies of scale. You just have to know what economies of scale looks like to answer the question. It's what I call the kind of 2-pronged question there. Next, let's do a free response, because your AP test is going to be a free response this year. I'm going to do this one with you. We're going to talk about the different type of costs. We're going to get you guys out of here, okay? Assume a firm uses capital as a fixed factor of production and labor is a variable factor. The marginal product labor at first increases, right? Making more per worker, and then decreases. I can already predict they're going to ask me about a certain something. A, using a correctly labeled graph, draw and identify the firm's average total cost curve, average variable, and marginal cost. And then B, we're going to talk about in a second. C, we're going to talk about, and then D says draw a long run average total cost curve that has regions of economies of scale followed by diseconomies of scale. Why don't we do this? Let's do A and D first, because I can do it with my document cam here. And then, all right, so A said to draw, I believe, let's see here, average total cost, average variable cost, and marginal cost, right? So let's go ahead and draw those 3 cost curves. So marginal cost, go ahead and do that one first. Remember, it did say that your marginal cost curve, your marginal product increased, then decreased, driving up your marginal cost. Make sure you include that. If you just had like a line like this, it wouldn't be counted because they're telling you your marginal product is increasing. And then label that marginal cost. And then, so here's the trick, right? So let me show you over here. If I just draw a marginal cost curve and I know, okay, they want an average total cost, look how sloppy that is. Because what did I tell you guys? That this marginal cost always has to go through the very bottom. So here's a trick in doing this. If you have to, I know you don't have to draw, but if you're drawing these for yourself to answer a question, just remember average total cost, average variable cost, and remember average variable cost starts getting, so there's average total, that's a terrible T up there, there we go. Average variable cost, and remember that's getting a little closer as we move forward. And so marginal cost is going through the bottom of both. And then D said, show economies of scale followed by diseconomies of scale. So you draw this and you label it long run average total cost. So if you saw a graph like that, that would be economies of scale over here. Long run average total cost is falling. This would be diseconomies. And I'm not going to keep writing it out because it's sloppy. So diseconomies of scale right there. Okay. So make sure your marginal cost goes through the bottom. Make sure you follow this stuff, right? Make sure that if they ask you, right here, if they drew this for you and then said, explain why this is happening or why this is going through this, as long as you can explain it, you're going to be golden. So then we get to B, why is the marginal cost curve shaped as it is? If you guys remember that the reason it increases is diminishing marginal returns. then think to yourself, why would it fall? Because increasing marginal returns. So you could say increasing marginal returns followed by diminishing marginal returns. Okay, kind of an easy one. And then B2, what does the difference between AVC and ATC represent? So what plus average variable cost equals average total cost? Average fixed cost. And if you just wrote AFC, the reader understands. C, last but not least, define economies of scale. So we just talked about this 5 minutes ago, is as your output increases, your long run is key here. We're talking long run cost curves. So as your output increases, your long run average total cost fall. There's economies of scale. So would you want to see something like this? Probably. I think some of you probably feel a little more confident with your monopoly graphs, things like that, which you might happen to see. So here we go. Let's move on and look at a couple costs or a couple curves, excuse me, that are not free response, because this is something you really could see. So if the firm produces Q1 units of output, let's see here, let me move this so we can read all the answers. There we go. The firm will experiencing which of the following? Okay, so Q1, your short run average total cost curve. If you're producing Q1, okay, right here, what are you looking at? And then if you're producing Q1, what are you seeing with your long run average total cost curves? Well, let's start with a long run first, just because, right, we just have been talking about it. So at Q1, what's happening with your long run? It's falling right here. So if it's falling, what does that mean? It means you're experiencing economies of scale. Okay, so on, so good. So you know you're going to be between A and C. Now, in the short run, they're asking about diminishing or increasing marginal returns. What cost curve does that deal with? Your marginal cost curve. At Q1, what is happening to your marginal cost curve? It is increasing. If your marginal cost is increasing, that is due to diminishing marginal returns. Each additional worker's producing less than the previous, or your output is increasing at a decreasing rate. It's driving up your marginal cost. So you know the answer is C. The marginal cost curve. Now, this is an awesome question. It's a fantastic question, because you have to go through this and say, okay, what are they asking me about? When I see increasing and diminishing marginal returns, then I know it's the marginal cost curve. So let's see where I am. And then in the long run, I know they're asking about the long run total cost curve, right? Does a short run average total cost curve matter? Not right now. That's not what they're asking about. So what are they asking about? What do they want me to tell them? Next, let's talk about the two different types of profit. Spend a couple minutes talking about this. This is extremely important when we get to cost curves. Cost curves include our economic cost, not our accounting cost. So please know these, write these down. If you get a question, and a lot of explanation points are, if you have this much accounting profit, how much economic profit do you have? Kids struggle with this. So today is a good day to nail these in and figure out exactly why. So accounting profit is total revenue minus total explicit cost. So your explicit costs are what you're paying out in cash payments, right? It's your bills you're paying. Those are your explicit cost. So your rent, your utilities, your salary, things like that, okay, your wages you're paying out to your workers. In accounting profit, so what's total revenue? Price times quantity. I sold 10,000 hats. I sold them for $5 each. That's $50,000. When I look at all my costs for my rent, my wages, it was $40,000. Therefore, hey, my accountant says, congratulations, you made $10,000 in profit. Which, if you want to know what Nike's first year's profits were, is pretty fascinating looking at that. There's an actual awesome podcast, if you have time, called Business Wars. It talks about Nike versus Adidas. In their first year, I think they sold a couple hundred pairs of Nikes, or maybe it was a couple $100 worth. I think they had about $4,000 in revenue. That's not much. Today, I think Nike does a little bit more than $4,000 a year in revenue. So that's how you figure out your accounting profit. Now remember, your accountant looks at numbers. Think about this. If you're going into accounting, math is your strong suit. What you don't ever say as an accountant is, but I wonder what this person could be doing. You don't care about that. So when we look at economic profit, think from the mind of an economist. What did I tell you on day one when we started going over review? Opportunity cost. The most vital thing for economists to think about, that every choice you make, you're giving something up. We call that the opportunity cost, the best thing you give up. So economic profit is total revenue minus both your explicit cost and your implicit cost. And what are implicit costs? Those are your non-monetary cost. It's basically your opportunity cost. So we'll use me really quick because I'm sitting here. As a teacher, what are my costs? Good news, I live a mile from my school. So my gas bill is very low, and these days they're probably paying me to drive. So clothes, printer cartridge once in a while, some things for my room, right? Not a lot of coffee. I do drink a lot of coffee. Things of that nature, okay? But that's about it. So we'll make it easy, $1,000 a year. Let's say I make $50,000. You subtract my cost, and my accountant says, congratulations, you made $49,000 in profit. Some of you are laughing right now. Stop laughing. However, I go to my neighbor who's an economist, and the economist says, you know what you should be doing? You should be playing in the NBA, which some of you might not. I'm 5'7", I'm almost. So I probably would not be in the NBA. But if he said, you could be in the NBA and you could be making $2 million a year, therefore you do not have a profit. Your economic profit is negative 200, and right? If you could make $2.5 million a year, then you've given up 200 and like a lot, okay? 2.45 million. Therefore, I'm giving up an awful lot. So think about, from an economic standpoint, you have to add in your opportunity cost. So accounting profit, this is key. They ask this question all the time. It's an important part. Accounting profit must be larger than economic profit because there's always an opportunity cost to your decision. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of these. So, and then another term that you need to know, if they ask about, and they say this firm is currently earning a normal profit, what does that mean? A normal profit is zero economic profit. This is important to understand because I've thrown a lot of like economic accounting, implicit, explicit, and people are like, whoa, listen, let's keep this really clean and simple here. If you're making zero economic profit, are you making money? Yes. Are you making your revenue? Yes. Zero economic profit. Let's say I open a restaurant, right? My wife's she's kind of a chef. She went to culinary school. She can cook well. And let's say she's making shrimp and grits and blackened New Orleans shrimp, which she makes, she used to make, and it's fantastic. She opens a restaurant. At the end of the year, she makes profit, $200,000. The economist, however, says, you know, you could have opened a different type of business and made $200,000 doing that. Therefore, your economic profit is zero. And the reason this is important is if I think people are making economic profit, I might try and get into that marketplace and steal some of that profit. And you can look at all the firms that do things like this. Whenever something becomes fashionable, all these businesses jump into this, okay? So it's important to understand you're still making money, right? Your accountant says you're making profit. So here's the restaurant, 200,000. Entrepreneur could have been making 150 in a different job. So I actually know someone out in California now who is working in a restaurant. They finally said, I'm done. And they got hired by, I can't say who, but it's a former CEO of a very large tech company. And this private chef is now cooking for this family, probably making more money, and their schedule is a little bit unique. They wake up around 10 and they go shopping. They text the family, what do you want for dinner? They go to the farmer's market, they cook, home by 9. Much different lifestyle than being a chef in a restaurant. That's what a private chef, you can make money doing that. Plus, they put $50,000 of their own financial capital in the business. So maybe they bought a $50,000 van to transport in places. You'd be making zero economic profit. Those are your costs, your explicit, 50,000 plus your implicit. Okay, so if you understand this idea of the difference between explicit and implicit and adding them, we call that your total cost. So profit is total revenue minus total cost, your economic profit. So far, so good. So let's look at a couple things that the AP could ask. Which of the following statements regarding accounting, profits, and opportunity cost and economic profits is true? So with positive opportunity cost, a firm can never, first of all, the word never is just dumb here, right? So if there's positive opportunity cost, well, there's always positive opportunity cost, and I can still earn economic profit. So that doesn't make sense. Accounting profits are equal to economic profits minus opportunity cost? No, right? they have that backed up. They have that switched around. C, if accounting profits are less than opportunity costs, there will be economic losses. So let's say my economic profit is $50,000, but I could be doing something and earning $100,000, then I would be losing. So I would have economic losses. So C is correct. And I didn't write that down because I knew you guys, for some of you, this is review and you probably understand this idea that you can have negative profit. But I tell my students all the time, I actually used to sell health insurance down on the coast of South Carolina from Myrtle Beach to Hilton Head. And it was not for me. And my boss, when I quit, said, you're going to make, I guarantee you're going to make $100,000 this year, probably about $130,000 next year. And I still quit. And the next year I drove carriages and gave tours in Charleston. And I made $14,000 a year. So my accountant would say, congratulations, you made $14,000 a year. The economist would say, you gave up a $100,000 job to make $14,000 a year. That doesn't begin to make sense. What if I told you I didn't have economic losses? There's only one way that could be true. And if you're a smart, rational student out there and you're going, I know this deals with opportunity cost. Yes, my opportunity cost was so high for that other job. I did not want to drive up and down the coast and bother business people and try and sell them health insurance. I had so much utility, satisfaction from giving carriage tours. So my marginal benefit was so high that you could say my opportunity cost is so high of doing the other job that the implicit benefit I received doing carriages must have been $86,000. And believe it or not, it was. It was. Life's too short. Okay, an entrepreneur has earned enough total revenue to cover her accounting cost, but economic losses are being incurred. And so what does that mean? Okay, so an entrepreneur has earned enough total revenue to cover. So she's got all of her accounting cost, her explicit cost out there, but she's losing money. So that means that, is it A, her accounting costs are larger than economic cost? Well, we don't know that, no, because we're talking opportunity cost. If we get to B, her accounting profits are less than her implicit cost. So this is what's important. So I make $20,000, that's the amount of money, but my opportunity cost was 50. What does that mean? That I've covered my accounting costs, but I have economic losses because my implicit cost, my opportunity cost is greater than my accounting profit. Okay, you guys getting this? I hope this idea that I can earn money and still have economic losses. Would my accountant say I was losing money? My accountant doesn't. Well, I don't have an accountant. Public school teachers typically don't. But if I did, my accountant wouldn't say, yes, but what is the opportunity cost of you teaching? They just know I teach. They don't care, right? And then I love this question. So let's take a minute and kind of go through this because this is a really solid question, something that could be asked on the AP test. So instead of being employed at a printing company to salary, so write this down, just jot it down. She could earn 25 grand a year. That's what she was earning. Sally quits. So she's out 25,000 right now. She's going to start her own printing firm. Rather than renting a building she owns, she owns to someone else for $10,000 a year. So she could earn $10,000 a year in rent. She's giving that up. So you have to add that to her cost. She's going to use it for the location of her company. Okay, so she's out 25 that she could have made, plus the 10 she could have earned in rent. Her cost for workers and all that, $125,000. So $125,000 plus 25 she could have made, her implicit cost, that's 150, plus the 10 she could have made. So that's 160,000 now is her economic cost. Total revenue is 155,000. So she made 155,000. Her economic cost is 160,000. So what is her economic profit? Right? 160, but she made 155, it's total revenue, so therefore it's negative $5,000. So is that her accounting profit? No, of course not. They wouldn't add in, right, the 25,000. And so, I mean, they would look at her total cost, but not what she could have made. So her economic profit is negative $5,000. Easy stuff. Okay, we have just one, I believe. So here's the good news. Because it is 3:34, why don't we take a couple minutes? I'm just going to walk you through. We're not going to go over this today. We'll go over it tomorrow. And then tomorrow we start really getting into kind of moving into this idea of perfect competition and the cost and how margins and marginal cost, marginal revenue and all that good stuff. So it's really an important couple days, honestly, for the AP test. This chunk makes up a lot of the AP test. So they're going to ask what market structure they sell output, what market structure they hire their employees, all that information. So remember, one of the things I told you is my goal is to make sure, because it's free response, understand what are they asking. And I always tell my students, everything in the first sentence or two is given to you, right? So they can sell all the output at $3 each. That should trigger something. They can hire all the workers at $11 each. That should be a clue. And then using marginal revenue product analysis, how many employees should they hire? How'd you determine that? So you're going to have to use the word marginal in your answer. D, based on what you give them in C, then tell us how many output or how much output. And then E, what we did today. So here's what I'm asking. Go ahead and do this. Don't look back at what we just did in the last few minutes. See if you can get an answer for E. And I don't care if you get it right or not, because tomorrow we go over it, either you got it right and you're like, awesome, because there's going to be some math involved. If you missed it, that's okay, because a lot of times you learn, right, when you're missing things, like why you missed it is important. So if you have the wrong number down, tomorrow when I go over it, hopefully my explanation will go through and be like, that's why. Now I get it. I didn't put this number or I added that number to it. So easy one. My guess is this is going to take you about 6.5 minutes to do. And that's it. Look at that. We're out. Man, out here, 3:36. I like it. So tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, huge, huge, huge stuff. And then Friday, I love it because we get to talk about price discrimination, which is so much fun to talk about. So all of you students down there in Loudoun County, Virginia, I know there are some very wise, smart students down there. You guys keep plugging away at the stuff. You're going to do great on this AP test, I promise. The more free response, the more explanation points that I can have you guys work through, the better off you're going to be. So once again, if there's any technical issues, please let the College Board know. And as always, thank you for watching. I certainly hope you will join tomorrow and finish up that practice question. You guys have a great afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you're doing this, probably 3 in the morning. And I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.